Oh man, rock on! I am so stoked to be here with you guys, and thank you to the faculty for this deep honor, and thanks to each of you. Just the pleasure of being here with you on such a profound moment in your journey to becoming extraordinary leaders and healers. So thank you. Anyway, today, I want to talk a little bit about leading and healing well, and what it means to lead and heal well in the world. And that really begins with leading and healing well from within. So today, I want to really share and connect with you on what is health and healing, and offer you some resources to sustain and nourish you on your journey. So, rather than this being a commencement speech, I'd rather this be a commencement conversation. So, what is the root of the word health?
Heal.
Heal. Okay, so what's the root of the word heal? Because it's the same root word.
Heat.
I'll tell you, I answer. Punt. Okay. Anybody? So it doesn't come from Latin. It doesn't come from Greek. It comes from Old English, hail. The root of the word health is wholeness. Wholeness. What's the root of the word patience? The patience we are and the patience we care for. Okay. Okay. That does come from Latin. That's patiens, which means to suffer. So our patients suffer from fragmentation of mind, body, and spirit. And our role as healer is to bring them back to a place of essential wholeness, health. That's our journey, right? That's our journey. Now, that said, as you emerge to become leaders, the most beautiful definition of leadership that I've recently come by is leadership is the capacity to influence and heal, to influence the character and behaviors of others for good. And when you're thinking of this journey towards health and wholeness, we're talking about a journey of influence, you having influence. But let me also talk very specifically about what that journey is. When you talk about wholeness, this is not about becoming whole, because we were all born whole to begin with, right? It's an act of remembrance. It's an act of remembering the wholeness we already are, right? And you as leaders and healers, the way you touch your patients, the way you touch your patients with your hands and with your heart and with your mind is reminding your patients of the wholeness that they already are. That's the journey, right? That's the journey. Amen. Right on. So what is one of the biggest things that fragment that sense of wholeness? What is one of the biggest things that fragment that sense of wholeness for all of us? Stress, right? Stress, pain, trauma, right? Mental illness. All of these things fragment. And fundamentally, it's the threat, it's the fear and threat of stress that we're dealing with, right? And when you look at the nature of what the challenge we have in the healthcare system, 75 to 90% of all patients you will see will have stress-related conditions that they're coming to see you with. The real challenge is if you're grinding away in clinic, patient steps into the room to meet you as a clinician, and what do they discover? They discover they're the second most stressed out person in the room because the clinician's more stressed out than they are, right? That's the problem. And so when you look at how stress maps against the human brain, interesting enough, maps against Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The regions below are focused on safety and survival, limbic system, love and belonging, higher cortical circuits and prefrontal cortex in particular leads into significance, self-actualization and significance. When we experience, here we are, the threat of stress, We're driving all of that energy and information flow in our brain down into our safety circuits. And as we do that over and over again, we become exhausted. When we forego love and belonging, we become disconnected. When we forego that sense of significance, we have a reduced sense of accomplishment. Do you recognize those three elements? Exhaustion, disconnection, reduced sense of accomplishment. What does those three elements represent? That's burnout. That's burnout. That's how we burn out. We drive all of our information flows down into our survival circuits. But that's only part of the story on stress. That's only part of the story. There's another bigger part of the story, and that is there are many different kinds of stress responses. And there are at least two others that are really key over here. Another response, when you feel stressed out, you don't only release cortisol. You also release oxytocin, the cuddle chemical, the molecule of bravery. And that leads us into the tend and befriend response. So you can sometimes feel the threads pulling at you. On one hand, you're being pulled into fear and threat. Another part of it, you're compelled to call a friend and reach out for support. Feel those threads, because that tend and befriend response, you can use as inspirational fuel, moving you up Maslow's hierarchy of needs to regain that sense of connection. And then you have something called the challenge response. Who's heard of the challenge response? So the challenge response is an awesome stress response. What it is before I stood up over here on stage to give a speech, I was really nervous. I was really stressed out. But instead of going into this place, well, I did say, what happens if I screw up? Yeah, that did go through my mind. But instead of going there, there's another thing that comes up in the challenge response. You feel that energy, and rather than actually kind of falling into threat, you rise to challenge, and you use that energy in service of what really matters in your life. It's the feeling of, I'm stressed, but I'm amped. It's go time, let's go, right? Let's do it. And that challenge response leads you into places that leads you into significance in your life, purpose and significance. Now, there's a magic formula over here that determines whether or not you're going to rise to challenge or cave under threat. And that formula is, what is the relationship between your demands that you face in your life and the resources you have to cope? That's the formula. And so what I want to offer you today is some very practical skills and tools to actually better work that equation, if you will. So let's first talk about demands. Let's talk about demands. So again, if your demands exceed your resources, you'll rise to challenge. If your resources do not meet your demands, you'll cave under threat. So how do we actually best deal with demands? One of the key things is you are going to have to learn to say no to certain things, right? And how do you say no? I encourage you to read a book by William Ury, founded the School of Negotiation at Harvard. And he wrote a book, The Power of a Positive No. For you to say an effective no, what you first need to know is your deeper yes. When you know your deeper yes, you'll be able to reach for a matter-of-fact no. And then you'll be able to find a yes that could still hold somebody else with kindness and self-respect. So really think about how you're going to manage your demands. But more key than that is, how are you going to actually resource up? How are you going to resource up? How will you become internally resourceful to meet any demands that you face on your journey now? So I want to give you at least 4 key ways of resourcing up. First one is, I'm going to invite you to change your definition of stress. Change your definition of stress. The old definition, Hans Selye said, stress essentially is there's a stressor. Our stress response is a physiological response to that stressor. So the definition implied by that is, can I cope? Can I cope? So when you feel stressed, how empowered do you feel when you feel stressed? It's like, damn, I can't cope, right? So now what happens is we get stressed about being stressed, right? One of my favorite definitions of stress comes from Kelly McGonigal at Stanford. And she says, just put this in your back pocket. It's a game changer. It totally changes the game. She says, stress happens when things you care about are at stake. That's a game changer, because that means every time you get stressed, it means you give a damn about something, right? That's why and that's why we burn out, by the way, in healthcare, because we really, really care about our patients. The key over here is not to battle stress. The key is to feel your stress and ask, what is it that I really care about over here, and allow yourself to put your energy in that. And don't forget self-care in doing that, right? Right on? Okay. Second piece of this. Stacey shared that I wrote one of the early textbooks on evidence-based medicine. It was my second choice. I really had always wanted to do this work in leadership and resiliency. And I went out 10 years. I've, trained tens of thousands of healthcare providers on evidence-based medicine all around the country. And somebody said I had a successful career, but I felt like I lost my way. Because for me, evidence-based medicine is the mind of medicine, and what I also value is the heart of healthcare. And I spiraled into a depression, really thinking that I'd lost my way. And for you, you're at a point right now, I really want to encourage you to follow your heart. And even when you lose your way, you can find your way back. And I really felt I lost my way because I'd come off the path of my journey. And I remember it was about 8 years ago, and I was putting my son to bed, Dylan, who was 4 at the time. And I had a mindfulness practice. And, with mindfulness, watching your thoughts, actually, when you're under stress, there are 4 buckets of thoughts that go through your mind under stress. First one is, what if, and all the catastrophes that could happen in your life. If only, and the regrets of your past. What's wrong with me and what's wrong with other people. Somehow that never takes you to a very inspired place in your life, right? Yeah. And then what happened, so I was when I was putting Dylan to bed, I was just racked with this pain, this went into a contortion of the skin. What was going in my mind? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? How could I have taken this wayward journey, where I've lost my purpose, which is ironically helping other people finding their purpose? And then a miracle happened. And the miracle that happened was a question popped into my brain. And the question that popped in my brain was, how can I find my way home? How can I find my way home? And the moment that question hit, I found a place of stillness that if I was on drugs or psychotherapy for a year, I would never have hit that place of stillness. And I was like, what the hell just happened? It was like somebody walked in my brain and flipped a switch. And I realized that all I had done was asked a better question. And for me, home is wholeness, by the way. Home is wholeness. It's coming home. And then I realized I'd spent a decade of my life training tens of thousands of healthcare providers on a process of evidence-based medicine, which begins by asking the right question to begin with. Then it merges into finding the right answers, evaluating those answers, applying them, and looping back around, is what I'm doing working. And then I realized it wasn't a wayward journey. That was a journey I was meant to travel. Because I realized when I asked, how can I find my way home, all I had done was I'd asked a better question. And by doing that, that recruited different neural circuits in my brain rather than I said, what's wrong with me? When you ask a good question, you will find great answers. The key of here is to ask great questions. So if you're under stress, instead of saying, what's wrong with me, what's wrong with others, if you begin to ask, okay, difficult moment, in this moment, what's that I'm here to learn? How can I better connect with myself, mind, body, and spirit? How can I better connect with others? How can I connect with my deepest source of inspiration? What's my highest purpose and service? You put yourself into the stream of inspiration. When Caleb, right on, brother, where's Caleb? Right on. When you say the siren song, that's what you're listening to. You're listening for the siren song, that place in your heart. That'll guide you right on every step of the way. Yeah. So second piece of this is, let's frame good questions in your life to tap into those resources, that internal wisdom and resources that you have. Third piece of this is the best resources we have, and I'm just mindful of the families of support and love that you've had here all these years, on this journey. Just, first of all, just like a huge, huge round of applause for family. Yeah. People are our most precious resources. They're our most sacred resources. When we're under stress with individuals, what tends to happen in our relationships is we go into, there's one person who's stressed, they then trigger your stress and self-doubt. Now you're stressed, you go into fight and flight, you trigger their stress. Now you're around and around in the cycle of reactivity, right? Recognize it? So what is a cycle of creativity? How do we get into a cycle where we're actually a cycle of really deeply connecting with others? How do we do that? I didn't learn that from the science. I learned that from my mother. And my mother had never been sick a day in her life. She was 70 years old. This was about a decade ago. And I came down to San Diego, and she was losing weight. She had vague abdominal pain. And the doctors didn't think anything of it. And the doctor went away on a vacation. I took her over my mom's workup. The radiologist called me and said, "I'm sorry to have to tell you, your mother has pancreatic cancer and it's spread to her liver." The next phone call was the most difficult phone call that I'd have to make. I had to call and give my mom a diagnosis. And I picked up the phone and said, "Mom, I'm so sorry to have to tell you, you have pancreatic cancer and it's spread to your liver." And she said, "Oh my God, that's a silent killer, isn't it?" She knew she was going to die. And I shrieked because I was grieving already. I knew I was going to lose my mom in just a short few months. Now, as beautiful as my mom was, she was also racked by insecurity. Throughout her life, she really consumed a lot of energy and needed a lot of validation. But something happened when Mom was diagnosed with a cancer. She knew time was running out, so she began to radiate love. And we all wanted to be close to her. We wanted to be connected to her. And 3 days before she died, the rabbi came around to the bedside. Mom was no longer lucid. She was on hospice at the time, and we thought she had left already in many ways. And the rabbi, who had cancer himself, he leaned in and he said, "Yvonne, after all these years, what have you learned is the meaning of your life?" And I didn't think that she was going to be able to open her eyes or say anything. And miraculously, she opened her eyes. And I was sure she was going to say something. She was going to say, "To get love," because she craved love all her lifetime. But she opened her eyes and she said, "To give love. To give love. To give love." Those were her dying words. And so I said to a wise friend, I said, "My mom had this amazing transformation in her life. She moved from to get love to give love." My wise friend says, "But what if your mom had learned how to receive love in her lifetime?" And then it hit me, that cycle of connection, of creativity, if you will, with another, is the cycle of receiving and giving love with others. That's the journey. With our family, with our patients, receiving others with empathy and understanding, giving with authenticity and care. It's that simple and profound. So what I invite you to do is when you think about going in to see your patients, marrying that with asking good questions, you go in to see your patients, instead of just washing your hands, do a mind wash. As you reach for the door handle, see the question, how can I best receive and give with this individual who's been waiting for a long time to see me? And walk in with that physiological reset. That's the path of healing. So the final resource that I want to offer you is I want to offer you the ultimate resource, which is this notion that you are forever connected to an ocean of love and healing. You're forever connected to an ocean of love. So if you will, would it be okay if we did a mindfulness practice just to close this out? Rock on, guys. And I just want to say, I love you. I really love you. Like I have. It's good. All right. So